Hi, aloha. I'm Ken Love,
And I'm Jane Tai.
and together we're part of Hawaii Master Food Preservers. And thanks to the Department of Ag, we're able to show you a number of things. And today
Fermentation.
this is a crock pot, and it's used to ferment all kinds of things. I like to make dill pickles in it. We put in, regular cucumbers don't work, but the keiki cukes, which are Persian cucumbers, work really well and can be found all over Hawaii. Right?
And I like to ferment one of the things we're going to be working on today.
Napa?
Napa cabbage kimchi. Okay, so normally you would just use a large mason jar. Now you could vary in sizes, but if you're working, especially for fermentation, you don't want to use the half pints or even the quarter. A quart is probably the smallest size that you would do, but this is usually the typical size.
Yep.
In that it gives you a lot of flexibility. It's easy to kind of put your hand in there,
Or
which
you-
we will sanitize the jar
Or use a
afterwards.
tamper, but
Or use a tamper.
yeah, this is what we do in the Master Food Preservers class on fermentation, and all the students make sauerkraut. Now we're going to make it with just plain cabbage. You can put caraway in, you can put carrots in it, you can put a lot of different things in it, and just use the brine that you get from the cabbage and salt, and that you'll see pretty soon, right? So with various airlocks, because when you ferment, it forms.
Yes.
Yes, and you have to let the gas escape. And some people forgot. They left it in their car, and the next morning their car was pretty smelly, because when you're traveling and you just have it sealed so nothing leaks, boom, gas is enough to get the top off or break the glass.
Okay, so we have a couple of things. We have a couple of types of airlocks that could be used, and Ken's demonstrating one of them. It's actually this one that we're doing, and this will show you the construction for it. It can be used for different types of fermentation.
The bottom piece of metal, which is actually like a tamper, and it holds it under the brine that you're using for your ferment. And then this goes on top to provide pressure, and it will lock depending
How you turn it.
how you turn it. And then this just covers it. And there's water that goes in here, and this sits on the water. And that's it. It lets the gas escape. That's one type of airlock. And this is another type, where the escaping gas comes up through here, through the pipe in the middle of this, and the gas comes out and down and just comes out.
Good.
Yeah. And then, once it's fermented, depending on what it is, you could take the top off, or you could take the whole thing off and just put a regular lid on to seal it.
The other way you could actually cover the jar is to use cheesecloth. Readily available, and this is what it looks like inside. Usually you can buy them in single sheets, you can buy them in a roll, you can buy them in big rolls. And all we're doing is cutting it to size, just a little bit more over the edge of the jar, and then just screwing it on. Because it's so porous, the gas will just dissipate, and you won't have to worry about it overflowing. But before you even put any of the airlocks on, which we'll show you, what you will do is that once we have all of our product in there, you're going to tamp it down to get as much air out as possible. It is going to sit in a brine that we will show you when we actually do it. And then put the airlocks on, and then put the cheesecloth on. But to keep it down, we'll also show you another tool that we use, or a little trick tip that we use to keep everything down. So
Yeah, and we also take 2 outer leaves of the cabbage and put that on top of everything else. So if that does come up, because sometimes when the gas forms at the bottom, it'll push some of the cabbage up to the top, and it becomes inedible. So we can take those. It's not dangerous, but it just doesn't taste good. And anyway, so we take out those, when you're ready to eat it, you just take out those bad leaves, and then you don't need anything, and you just put it in the fridge and go for there.
Okay, so shall we sanitize, get everything all ready to start?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay, great.
Okay. So anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to save a couple of these outer leaves in reserve, so that we can get everything, tamp everything under them.
So these are the outer leaves that Ken was talking about that essentially once they're in the jars, we would cover up whatever we're fermenting, in this case sauerkraut. We cover up the sauerkraut in the brine and just put it right on top to avoid possible exposure later on. If it doesn't get exposed because of gas that's created in the bottom and this rises to the top, then these are the ones that you would discard. But your sauerkraut then underneath it would still be fully intact under the brine and really great to eat, essentially.
So, and you want to cut about the size of a quarter, so a little bit less than a 1/4 inch, and that'll become the sauerkraut.
But it's 1/4 inch. You can. There's a little bit of leeway and flexibility to that. You could go a little fatter if you want. Now, Ken likes to just go ahead and cut it this way. For me, because I prefer things not to roll, so I cut it in half so it's more manageable for my fingers.
Do it that way.
And then I will cut mine a little bit fatter, so you've got a little bit more grating.
So in this case, we're going to have both in the same jar.
Right.
So you can see the difference in the thickness. Mine just kind of falls apart.
And I have to break mine apart.
How do you break it apart?
Well, a little bit more breaking apart.
Oh. And sometimes even when it's skinny, the way it folds together, that was like that. So we're going to cut it again even finer. I do love sauerkraut.
I like sauerkraut on various kinds of sandwiches.
Oh yeah.
Okay, we're just going to put, we're just putting the cut cabbage in here.
We're going to transfer bowls later when we start massaging it.
Right.
Now I'm on the core, so I'm going
Yeah, I
cut
just
it again.
took out some of the core, so.
I just cut it up thinner. So, while Jane is finishing that up, I'm gonna get ready for the next step, which is, so the recipe from So Easy to Preserve is based on 25 pounds of cabbage.
Which clearly we did not have 25 pounds of cabbage
Yeah, this
here.
is probably more like 3 something. So we're gonna weigh that.
Okay.
Up to 3.11. So we're a little over 3.5. Right?
Little over 3.5.
Yep. So we got to figure out how much salt, because it's 3/4 of a cup of salt for 25 pounds. So there's not a lot of salt that goes in this. And then we have to just massage it, and it develops this liquid as the salt soaks the water and moisture out of the cabbage. So how much are we going to use?
1 tablespoon.
If you say so.
We could probably do a little bit more. The
Just
calculations.
not even a...
Calculations just a little. I'm just spreading it around a little bit. You can put it in a clump because when you're massaging it, it's going to go around and around anyway.
I would put just another,
Want to put just a tad more?
just a tiny
Okay.
bit. So,
All right, I'm putting a tiny
whoa.
quarter of a, there we go. It's good enough. We actually poured out the kosher salt into here so that we don't, it's such a small measurement that we don't want to spill it all over the table.
So you can see where we're starting with, and it's already gone down a little bit. So we're breaking up the cells by the massaging, and that helps to get the, that with the salt.
And the salt is actually drawing out the liquid.
Right.
It's creating its own brine essentially by using the water that's already in the cabbage.
You try to get the bigger pieces broken up.
So while you're massaging, and massaging is just not like tossing a salad. You're actually trying to squeeze, help the salt and squeeze as much of the liquid out as possible. And as you can see, as we keep going, it gets wetter and wetter to the point that you're going to see this reduced quite significantly. And it's just a matter of a few minutes. You don't have to do it super hard. You don't need super strength to really do it. Just keep at it essentially. And when Ken's broken up some of the bigger pieces so that they'll conform to the smaller shreds, that we had cut up. And we're now almost getting to the point that you can see a little bit of liquid.
Yep.
Okay, so now that we're almost there, we'll give it back to you. How's that? There you go.
See that liquid?
So you may ask, I mean, for those people who haven't fermented before, and I've done the same thing, is that I've actually said, okay, well, we just want liquid, so I've added water to it. That doesn't quite work because your bacteria resides inside of the, in this particular case, cabbage, or in the vegetable, or root vegetable like ginger or whatever you're fermenting, essentially.
In this bowl, the water, or actually the moisture is all spread out and still in the cabbage. So we want a lot of that to come out so that it covers. See, every part of the cabbage that I take up, it's got a lot of moisture. So I just like to have lots and lots of moisture. Once it goes into the jar, we'll tamp it down and squeeze a lot of that out. So that moisture needs to cover the, and we can show you another secret if we don't get enough moisture after tamping. Ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things and why we massage it and know when to put it in the jar and is when we get a lot of liquid on the.
How much liquid?
Well,
it fluctuates, right?
Yeah, it's just that. Well, you're going to see it. I'm going to pour it in.
Okay, before you pour it in,
You're going to tamp.
I'm going to tamp it down and press as much of the air out and keep it solid packed. You're going to keep in mind what we said before, as it ferments, it's going to form the gas, which causes air bubbles, and we want to make sure it stays submerged
Gas bubbles.
in your brine.
Okay. And so I'm going to
Pour the liquid in.
Yep. There we go. And then we got a piece of cabbage to put in. So everything's under that now, right?
And then we're going to take the pieces of cabbage that we had before.
And it was all washed, but this is the outer.
Before you do that, let me just make sure I get
Everything covered.
everything covered here.
There is another trick, too, to keeping it submerged. And that trick,
Okay, we should be good here.
yeah, I'll put this in. We pre-make a pickling brine and put it in a Ziploc. And for people who don't have, I got a little bit too much brine in there.
Well, while he's decanting some of the brine, if you can see past the bubbles and where my fingers are, you actually can see all of the liquid that's in there, and it's going pretty much to where I had added the large pieces of cabbage leaf. But we want to make sure, and if I let it go, it still comes back, expands back up. So we want to try to keep this as far down submerged in this jar as we can, and that's the brine that he's put together. He's actually bagged it into a Ziploc bag.
And it's just a standard pickling brine. So if you put water in this bag and it broke, you'd add all the water would seep into the recipe, and that just doesn't do it. So you want to
A little bit less.
Just a little bit less?
Just a tad less. Okay.
Gotta seal the top.
I know. I'm just fitting it in there and getting as much air as I can out of the top before I seal it.
We use the bag in the class because people don't have airlocks necessarily at home. So in this case, we're not going to use the bag. We're just going to make sure that that's down there. And then we're going to, see, there's a little bit exposed, so we're just going to pour a little bit of the brine on the top. Then we're going to put the airlock on, and we also need to put a little bit of the brine, or water in this case, in the airlock so that the gas can escape. Right?
But if you don't, as Ken said, if you don't have the airlocks, both the metallic as well as this plastic one, and you did decide to use the brine bag, you can cover it up
with the cheesecloth. Yep.
And then just put the ring on just to secure the cheesecloth. And if your liquid, there's so much gas and your liquid actually bursts open, which it shouldn't, your cheesecloth will absorb that liquid anyway. And you'll let it sit for...
Actually, you know, you can eat it now if you wanted. When I do it in the big crock pot, I'll leave it for a month or so. It really doesn't matter. It's edible in any stage.
Hi, we're back, and we're now ready to start the second project. And the second project is also fermentation, but we're going to do it a little differently. It doesn't require brine. We are actually going to work with kimchi, or to make kimchi. And what we're going to be doing there is your base, well, the traditional kimchi uses Napa cabbage, and that's what we're going to use. We're going to use Napa cabbage. We're also going to have daikon, and we have some green onions that we're throwing in, some carrots, and actually then we have to make a sauce, and the apples will go, apple pears will go in the sauce, the grated ginger, some garlic, and depending on whether we want spices, how spicy or heat-wise we want, we may add a few of these peppers as well. In the sauce, the basic powder, or the basic ingredient of the sauce is actually a Korean spice called gochugaru. Gochugaru, sorry. I can never pronounce it correctly, and I apologize. We're also going to, on the top, we're going to add some sesame seeds, white sesame seeds. Most of the ingredients actually calls for a fish sauce, but rather than use a animal protein, we decided that we're going to go ahead and substitute it with a vegetarian sauce. And this one is just called yandu. We're trying it out and to see how it works out. But before we start cutting things up and everything else, the basic two things that we're going to be doing is actually we're going to be salting the Napa, cutting it to the size that we want it to eat to. And the same thing with the daikon, we're going to salt it slightly, rinse the salt off, and that's really just to kickstart and leach out some of the liquids that are in there so that it could absorb the sauce spices and herbs as it's fermenting.
We're ready to start with the kimchi, and the first thing we're going to start with is getting the individual leaves off, get them into the bowl because we're going to wash them. And no matter how well it's grown, you're still going to get a little dirt on the inside, just so there's no slugs. But a lot of it is just the natural formation too.
We cut the bottoms off just to make it easier to take the whole leaves off. And as you get closer to the core, it gets a little harder because you can see it gets stuck to the core.
So
we don't want to use the core for the actual kimchi. So while I'm washing these, Ken's going to go ahead and cube.
Well,
are you going to cube the daikon?
well, we can cube part and we can julienne part. How's that?
Sure. Mix and match.
Yeah, right now I'm just going to peel off
Okay,
the
and I'm going to wash.
skin. Most of this comes from Waimea on the Big Island. I'm really a fan of daikon cubed and oroshi, which is just grated, or even daikon sprouts. Kawari daikon is just is really good. So we're going to cube part of it and julienne part of it. So this we're going to salt too to get out some of the water, because you basically kimchi is a paste. So actually, if you make only daikon kimchi, they'll do a mix of shapes.
You can cut it in different shapes, different vegetables. I can have these a little more squat if we want it, you know, a little thicker. What Ken's going to be doing is actually getting the salt.
That's our salt?
Yes, that's the salt. And he's going to gently massage these pieces. And then after that, we're going to put them into this pan, just let it drain so that we could easily rinse it out.
So just pour all this in.
Uh-huh. That's the measurement. It was 2 cups of salt to the essentially 2 medium heads of Napa, but we had 3 smaller heads, if you will. So, and it's really just to kickstart the process of making
Fermentation.
fermentation, and again leaching out a little bit of the water that's already in the vegetable, because in this case we're actually going to be rinsing them out as well. So.
And you can see how the salt is already picking up the water.
I know, it's already getting pretty liquidy down here too. So while we're doing this, it's only going to stay salted for about, it fluctuates, but for this we're going to do it for about an hour, 60 minutes. And in half an hour, once we have this done, we're going to toss everything or turn everything around. Make sure that it's a little evenly distributed. This pan obviously is a little smaller than what we had anticipated, so we may just go ahead and put it back in a bowl. But like the sauerkraut, you'll also see this shrink a little bit as well too. So it'll fit a lot easier.
I think we can do both. How much salt do you want for this
Daikon
one?
is obviously, because we've cut it, it's a lot more porous than it is for Napa. So the salt that we require for daikon is just very, very little. We had 2 cups before for the Napa. This only goes for about 30 minutes really before we rinse it to get some of the salt off. And that's all we really need is ballpark 1 tablespoon.
Wow.
Well, it's very porous, so it's going to, you see it, as you're mixing it now, it's already starting to get soft, and all the water is actually starting to leach out.
Wow.
You've got liquid already.
Yep.
Which is going to take a little more time for the Napa cabbage.
And that's it. We just got to leave it sit now for a little bit.
Okay, so while we're doing that, or while these are needs a little bit of time for the water to be extracted, we're going to make the critical piece, the sauce.
Well, we are back, and now it's time to put together the sauce for our kimchi with lots of gochugaru. All right, we're ready to make the stuff. I've got the burr mixer ready, which I need to plug in.
Or would you like to start first?
Well, we can start with the recipe in order, I suppose, which is the gochugaru, right?
Okay.
Ooh. And no, it's not as hot as it looks. It's just the color's really intimidating, right? So, and next?
So this, in some traditional kimchi recipes, you'd ask, it would ask for a fish sauce, but we're doing it vegan, and so this is a substitute, a vegetarian substitution called yandu, and we're adding that in. Then also, since we have liquids, you would do water. You could basic ingredient, but we decided to make it a little bit more, more tasty in adding a vegetable broth that actually we created in a
previous show.
In a previous show and in another show.
Yep.
So that's going in there.
I'm gonna stir this in before just to break it up a little. Okay.
Okay. Then we have minced garlic. Oh,
Nope.
sorry, minced ginger.
Yep. We didn't mince the
No,
garlic.
we didn't mince the garlic, and then
So
I'm
we
gonna.
just put
We're putting garlic cloves in there. Hold on. Okay.
Yep. What's next?
I'm going to add in a little bit of sesame seeds. That should be good.
Yeah.
Should I get a little more?
Yeah, sure.
There you go. It's a little dry, so for a little more moisture and a little bit of sweetness to it, we're actually adding in an Asian pear.
This is, yeah, like Jane said, Asian pear or nashi or Korean pear. These were grown here, though, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Yep. Actually, we got 100 and some cuttings that are in the greenhouse now, so we can get some local pears because they're
nice.
very sweet. And since we found a couple trees, now we need to get those cloned and get them out there.
Okay, all we've done actually, we have, we're going to be doing green onions or scallions in the kimchi itself, but to give these are the stems that are a little harder, so we're going to give it a kickstart by blending it into the sauce as well. All right.
I think we got it.
I think we got it. We don't want to waste any of the sauce. It is very thick, as you can see. It's meant to be that way because what we will be doing the next step is rinsing out the Napa cabbage that we soaked in the salt and then cutting it up and smearing the paste over each leaf or each bit of the kimchi. We are also, as Ken's bringing over, we're also adding a few other items. We have the daikon also that was also soaked as well, but we're going to be adding green onions, some carrots, and also a few jalapeno, Hawaiian chili peppers, and a few other peppers in there just to spice it up a little bit. It's up to you what you want to add. You could add onions if you want, as opposed to green onions. You can add radish, turnips. What else have you seen? I mean,
Oh, and kimchi, a lot of the bean sprouts.
and bean sprouts, right? I've known people actually to add different fruits like star fruit in there or make a star fruit kimchi.
Oh, I know who did that.
And
My kid.
so it's your discretion, but it's really the basic
Okay.
ingredients of the sauce that's the critical part. Okay. Okay, so
Hey, you ready?
we're ready, but before we start, hold out one of the Napa leaves. You remember how thick they were and how rigid they were before we actually salted it. So we've only salted it for about an hour. We turned it over after 30 minutes just so that the top part actually got salted. And a lot of the liquid came out and it becomes extremely bendable, flexible. If you want it a little harder, rinse it sooner than the hour. If you want it still a little softer, but this is pretty soft already, you can keep it for a little longer. The timing, it all depends on you. The sauce will now go on each leaf just so we know it's very well coated. And just a point that Ken didn't explain, he was using what you call a hand-blended immersion blender, a burr blender.
I'm going to get started.
And while he's doing that, all I wanted to say was really, you could use a regular blender. A Vitamix is probably a little bit more powerful than a regular household blender. It's got to really be as fine as you can because you want it to get all over. Now, he's generously coating each piece. They'll go on top of each other, and then we'll add all of the other ingredients as well. So I'm going to hold this to his side. And I have a spatula here so that we can get every bit. While he's doing that, remember we also did, we also salted the daikon. Now we have two shapes, if you will. Cubed, that Ken liked, julienne, the way I like. Now the julienne one piece is still pretty floppy, as you could see. There are some pieces that are a little bit thicker, so it will be a little harder. Nonetheless, you'll have a little more variety when you actually finish your fermentation and decide that you want to eat those pieces. And to our taste, we're going to add, we had mixed in the ends of the green onions because they were a little harder and thicker. These are the reedier, thinner pieces, and that will ferment quite well when it's all mixed together. And we're going to add some carrots and our hot peppers, or chili peppers. And I will take the rest of this and put in my daikon, which I want coated really well. The daikon has still a little bit of liquid in there, so I'll loosen up the paste a little bit first. All right, so you can see how well it's coated. I mean, it is, I don't think you can see too much white in there anymore. But we are going to add, do you want to add all of the green onions?
Let's start with about half of the onions and half of the carrots and all of the peppers.
All of the peppers, okay. Now the carrots, you can cut the carrots as you like. We made it a little thinner so that the sweetness will actually go throughout the entire ferment. But you can cut them as you normally would cut circles, you know, or julienne them. And this I just, as I said, cut them, I actually made it slivers. I used a peeler to peel it up. And this part, I don't want to do it too hard because I want the carrots to get this paste, but I don't want to break the carrots up too much. Add the rest of it? All of the chili peppers?
Sure. You can always pick them out.
True.
And actually, you probably wouldn't tell if you bit into the garlic or the... Now, we used a mix of Hawaiian chilies and a couple jalapenos that I grew out back here, and one serrano. Now, you don't have to. You could just be happy with the Napa cabbage, which is a really common kimchi.
That looks nice and well mixed.
Yeah.
All right, then we're ready for the next one.
Well, it looks like a...
You're making like a loaf?
Yeah. I don't know. We can make all kinds of shapes with this.
That's nice.
Yep.
That's good.
I guess we got to put it in the bottles.
Yeah.
Right? So that's going to be one bottle probably. We might need three jars.
Okay, so let's clean up a little bit and get ready for the final step.
The final. I got a little carried away and started before you guys were here. So now that you're here, we can start filling the jars. Oops. And hopefully it'll get right down. Well, you got a spoon for this, right?
Well, I have a spoon, but it's easier if you can sort of massage it down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, don't take the funnel with you.
What's wrong with the funnel?
You know what? I'll hold on to the funnel.
Chicken.
Okay, give me a second. And
oh, look at all the goodies in there.
I want to
What do you want?
I want to tamp this down a little bit because it is a ferment and we want to fill it up and try to get as much air out as possible. And as you can see by me tamping it down, it's almost like, oops, half of the jar.
Wow.
So, yeah. Go ahead. Well, we want a little space because all of the liquids that's still in the vegetable is going to come out. And you don't want it all the way to the top. And with one
it's
of
like
the...
a half-inch headspace, like when we do other things, or,
Yeah.
or maybe
That
1-inch
would be easier.
headspace, because we want that the weight of that spring.
Keep going, one more little. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, let me tamp that back down, and I think we're good on this one.
Well, I wanted it a little sweeter, so we added an extra little bit of the Asian pear, the nashi, and Jane added a little more carrots and scallions. Now this one we're going to use a different airlock, so it doesn't have to be as tight as the other one. And I know we talked before that there's two different theories, that some people think it stops fermenting when you put it in the fridge.
Yeah.
But after just opening the jar that we had in there, it doesn't.
So after we've done with all of this and we've put all of the airlocks in, we would keep it at room temperature for about a day and a half.
I usually go for about a week. But
Well, it fluctuates. It's a day and a
Yeah.
half to whatever Ken does for a week. And then for me, I would actually put it into the refrigerator. It'll continue to ferment when you refrigerate it. But by that point,
yeah,
actually...
so you have to keep the airlocks on.
Yeah. Oh, you have to keep the airlocks on, that's true. But by that point, usually I'm kind of digging into the jar already and eating it up. I'm going to actually
We
take
ready to jar it up?
Yeah, so let's clean up a little bit and let's white the rims and get it all jarred up and finish off the process. How's that?
Yep, that
Okay.
sounds great.
Perfect.
Thanks. Anyway, welcome back. We are ready to top this.
So this one is the one that's spring-loaded.
So put that down here, right? Goes in like that. Then the weight, boing, perfect. Whoa.
You're holding it, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm holding it because otherwise it would have gone ping, flying up there. Perfect. And then remember, we're going to put a little bit of water in here.
Why are you doing that?
What the water does is provide the gap. So, because when that's on, I will put this down. And so when the gas comes out and is released during the fermentation process, it'll bubble.
No bubble. Okay, then you're going to go to the second one?
This one, yeah. This serves the same purpose as the metal one on here. Only what we're going to do is pour a little bit of water along the side, pop that in. Again, the gas will come up the middle, go down and come out, and there are holes in the top of the cap, so
It'll provide the ventilation.
ventilation and let the gas escape and not prevent the bugs from going in.
Nice.
And that's number 2.
Okay, then the third method, which is the simplest, and
The Jane system.
what I like to do is that I don't like to keep it uncovered. You don't want a full lid on it. I'm still going to use the ring, and I've used cheesecloth because that will allow the air, the gas to escape while it's fermenting at room temperature. And that's all I need to do.
And all of these will stay along with our sauerkraut. These will all stay down here for at least 3-4 days I tend to let them sit out in room temperature in the shade in a dark corner for about a week, sometimes longer unless I forget about them. We have left these in the fridge after 3-4 days and they're fine. They do keep, at least for me, they do keep fermenting. So
At a slower rate, though.
Huh?
At a slower
At a
rate.
slow, yeah, it's slowed down significantly. But if it doesn't have the air gap or a way to escape, it can puff up. Like I opened a jar of kimchi to eat the other day, and it was in a different kind of lid, one that somebody gave me, and poof. We'll be back in a minute with our wrap up.
We've done 2 projects using fermentation, a very simple sauerkraut using just cabbage. In this case, it's just head cabbage. And we've done another one that actually uses a different type of cabbage, an Asian cabbage or Napa cabbage. Again, backing up a little bit, the sauerkraut didn't require a sauce or a paste. And salting previously is different steps to get to where we need it. And where we need it really is to make sure that the vegetables itself lets out the lactic acid, the bacteria that you want for a good fermentation. We always stress about food safety to try to keep as clean as possible, and we say it's to eliminate microbes and bacteria and organisms. Yes, we definitely want you to do that, but that's the bad bacteria. There's good bacteria that resides in our foods. This is what fermentation is really all about, is actually to, lack of a better word, procreate those bacteria so that when you consume it, it helps in your body for digestion and for other kinds of various health reasons as well. You can, as we said, you can ferment. We only use vegetables. You could use different kinds of vegetables, radishes, turnips, beets, besides cabbage, carrots, beans.
For me, the best book on fermentation is by a mutual friend, Sandor Katz. Now, but yeah, he's done some pretty incredible things, and all the TV shows, when they have their section on fermentation, even Anthony Bourdain, they always had Sandor on the show explaining the finer points of fermentation.
So for Sandor, or Sandor's book, we like his book because it actually explains the process of fermentation. He's explored a lot of different ways and avenues for it. It's not strictly a recipe book, but it's really a behind the scenes of what happens when you ferment.
And the science.
And the science behind it. So that's why we would, it's a good, if you're interested in this process preservation method, this process, it is a good resource. As I said, there's a whole lot of, as Ken mentioned, there's a whole lot of recipes that's out there, and you can also make your own so long as you follow certain processes. And that's actually what he gives you as well. So it's not just an explanation, but the science and processes.
Yeah, because I think we must have 5 different books here on fermentation, but still, I always go to this one if I have a question.
So
right?
I can't wait for the next 3 days. For me.
Oh.
Then I'm going to eat my jar.
I tend to wait a week or so. I guess that's it.
I think that's it.
Any questions? Reach out, the Master Food Preservers page on Facebook, Hawaii Master Food Preservers.